this is an era where, keep in mind, when I had to get basic fundamental stats, sacks from a defensive end, interceptions, yards per catch, receptions, completion percentage, you know what I had to do, Field? I had to call all those schools. I had to pick up a landline phone, call 150 schools, small schools, major schools, everybody. I spent roughly 25 to 30 hours a week just calling schools. And then you find out a lot of information you didn't call about. Then I had to ask them about younger players on the team. These are all the football contacts at the colleges. A lot of them became really good friends of mine. I still call them to this day. But you couldn't just go to the internet and find stats. You had to call the schools. That's not scouting now. That's just basic stats. Then you had to go back with the big monster dish on the roof of Ramblewood Road back in the day. And that's how I was able to watch that in NFL games and do a lot of things and get access to a lot of things. Would call school, send me tapes, whatever you can. Whoever could send me a tape of a player, get it the best you can. I had friends in the league by then. I called them to help me out in that regard as well. So you had to really, I wouldn't say struggle to get it. You had to really work hard to get it. And I'm telling you, Phil, back in those days, I was staying up because the phone would ring all night. The only time I had any peace from the phone not ringing for orders, which obviously were important, we got a business going here, was around 10, 11 o'clock at night. So I'd be free from usually 10, 11 at night till 3 in the morning to do a lot of the work. I'd get up 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning because I had some radio to do and I had stuff to do. So I'm getting maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep. That's it on a regular basis, not just one day, but on a regular basis. And that went from the time I started in 1979, 80 all the way through the ranks. You put in a lot of time, put it that way. I was working 18 to 20 hour days on a regular basis.
The Field Talk podcast is presented by Roback. If you're watching right now, you see me wearing one of the signature hoodies, but there's so much more that Roback has to offer. I promise you, every time I go onto the website, there is a new item that is dropping. The updated Azalea collection is now available, pretty much head to toe with the best fit and the best feel. You got hats, you've got polos, you got Q-zips, you've got these hoodies, you've got joggers, you've got pants, you've got shorts, new styles of shorts. I'm telling you, every day, Roback is bringing you something different. And if you want to head on over to roback.com, that's RHOBACK.com, enter my name, Field, F-I-E-L-D, for 20% off your first order. If you're a football fan, there's a pretty darn good chance that you love the NFL draft. You have a lot of people to thank for that, including, of course, the draft prospects themselves. But somebody else that you better be thankful for is Mel Kiper Jr. Mel Kiper Jr. has become the face of the NFL draft, not just at ESPN, but truly of the NFL draft itself. But it wasn't always the world's most popular NFL offseason event. As a matter of fact, when Mel Kiper Jr. started thinking about turning the NFL draft into a passion of his, it wasn't even televised. It was barely even paid attention to. So on today's Field Talk podcast, we are joined by one of my favorite humans alive, Mel Kiper Jr., to hear how he has made the NFL draft one of the biggest must-see events on the entire sports calendar. All right, I can't contain my excitement, as if I don't spend enough time with sincerely one of my favorite people on planet Earth. We're back here now with Mel Kiper Jr. Mel, before we get into your history, how the heck are you, my friend?
I am doing good, Phil. It's Friday. How can we not be better than this, right? Whenever this is going to air, I don't know. But the thing is, I think you get to the weekend and we kind of get into draft week next week, where I was amazed, Phil, because I thought this past week we did more than we've ever done in terms of reports on the draft. So I guess it quiets down. All I say right now, about this time of the year, Phil, we say, just can we get us to Green Bay? Just get us to Green Bay ASAP. Okay.
Yep. I'm with you. We can't wait. The final countdown is here. We have talked about Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and the quarterbacks a whole lot. But now it's time to talk about your history, Mel. Obviously you and I have the honor to work with you and call you a colleague and more importantly, a friend now. But I have been watching you for the entirety of my life because hopefully, like most of the people that are watching or listening to this, I have always loved the draft. And one of the reasons why I love the draft is because you made it what it was. So I want to go into the Wayback Machine. This is draft 47 for you. Do you recall the time in which you first fell in love with the NFL draft? Because it's a whole lot different now compared to when you first fell in love with it.
Probably right after I was born, maybe. I don't know. It seems like that, Phil, because I go back when I was at Calvert Hall. You had to call like a number or listen to the radio, and they would only give you the local flavor, right? And they'd give you the Heisman Trophy winner where he was going. And then you had to wait for the newspaper the next morning, right? The Baltimore Sun was the paper in Baltimore, Maryland. So Baltimore Sun paper came in the morning, you look at it, and see where everybody went. But I think really for me, I started this when I was 17, 18. I started actually writing reports at 16. I'd give them to Ernie Accorsi at Colts camp. He said, "Who the heck is this idiot? Who is this guy bothering me? Like, get out of here. Get him out of here. Get security. Get him out of here, And because I'd come up to Ernie and I would have typewritten on the old typewriter, which you don't even know what it looks like, but an old typewriter, I would give it to Ernie. I'd run up to him when I was like 15, 16 at Colt camp. And he would actually, and Ernie became one of my best friends in all football of life. And he would just accept the papers. And then he actually read them and looked at them and would, every time I saw him, he would refer to what I said, and I'd give him all kind of stuff, because in those days, you didn't even know a depth chart from a team. Really, in the NFL, you didn't even know who was starting, backups. It was no way to get that information to the fans. So I figured, let's make it available to the public. And Ernie at that point said, what the information you would be providing, if you did that, the fans would crave, because there's nowhere else to get it. So really through Ernie, his suggestion and him pushing me to do it, it was basically saying, here's the general manager or an assistant GM at the time, became a GM, that really approved of what I was doing and applauded it and said, hey, go make this available to the public. So I was looking back at Ernie Accorsi as a key component in all this, because not only did he accept what I gave him, he responded to it. And then he liked it enough to offer me a position with the Colts when I was 23 in 1983, 84, which was pretty amazing. So Ernie Accorsi, back in my history field, was one of the persons that was as important as just about anybody.
I'm going to hold that thought about getting the job offer from the Colts in 83, 84 for just a second here. But as I think about the people that you've shared the set with on the NFL Draft Coverage, you've got people right now, you share it with Booger McFarland and Louis Riddick on night 1 and night 2. And those are two guys who played in the NFL. Booger was a first-round pick. Louis worked in a front office for 10 years. John Gruden prior to that. I mean, there's been a lot of people that you have shared the set with over your years at ESPN who have this background knowledge. People say, oh, he played or he coached or whatever it might be. Where did your football knowledge come from? You did not play college football. You didn't work in the NFL for 20 years prior to getting at ESPN. How did you kind of learn the ins and outs of scouting early on?
Well, I came up in a sports family. My father had played baseball, almost got to the minor league level. If it wouldn't have been for his shoulder, he'd been with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So, like I said, his best friend, Dick Walt, growing up, they played ball together. They coached together at Calvert Hall, and all the Walt family, from Richard to Michael to Joby, were all great friends of mine, and they played at the high. So my cousins were great soccer players. Tommy Mulford, Kevin Mulford, great soccer players, high school, college. And so it was an athletic family, and football was always, since I was baseball, Tommy and Kevin were soccer and could have played anything, but that's what they focused on. And I was focusing on baseball. And it wasn't like I didn't love football. I couldn't throw a football, couldn't catch a football. I could do all that, right? But we were focusing on football. And what happened with me was, in the 7th, 8th grade, I was playing at Mercy High School. It was fields at Mercy High School back in Baltimore, and I was pitching. And my father always said, when you get tired, take yourself out, right? I was a skinny kid back in those days, Field, okay? I was probably, I don't even know what my size was, but I was pitching, and I had a pretty good arm. Well, I got to the 6th inning. It was a playoff game. It was the first of 2 out of 3. And I'm pitching, and in the 6th, and I felt this arm just went, it was awful pain, but it was really the elbow. And I got through that inning, got through the 7th inning. We won like 1-0. And had to play a second game, played shortstop because I was pitcher shortstop. Got to that, we lost the second game. We had to play on a Saturday afternoon, like at noon. That whole, leading up to that game, I couldn't even raise my arm. So listen to this one. So I told my father when I was in the on-deck circle, guy hit me with the bat in the elbow. I didn't tell him what happened. To the day my father passed away, he did not know what happened to my elbow. We get to the game. One of the assistants, I kept saying, you're warm. I said, come a little closer. Come a little closer. So I got out there. Good friend of mine was playing. Keith Edmonds was leading off for the team we were playing. And he hit the ball right back up the middle. I could have fielded it. I was seeing stars. I didn't even bend. I went right through me out in the center field. And from that point on, we lost. I had to play another game for another team for Gus Cesanero, who was one of my great coaches, Mr. Gus. And Mr. Gus, we were playing on a team that afternoon. It was one of those like traveling teams, right? They were playing all over. I was playing third field. I got through that season. I couldn't throw the ball. I got the Calvert Hall. I couldn't throw. I got lucky. I played a couple of years, but my arm, it affected my hitting. I was shot. So that led me to football because I love football, watched it. I had a lot of people in our family who were coaching and doing all that. And I just love the scouting aspect. I love the evaluation aspect of baseball and football, even analytics part of it back in those days. I was trying to figure all that out. And I always tell people there was no way then, Field, you're talking about the mid 70s. There's no way to get information. Okay. You had to call all these schools. So it basically became a situation where I think, and my father always said, if you wouldn't have hurt your arm, you wouldn't have been doing this. He didn't know how I hurt it. He knew I did something to my arm, my elbow, but he never knew what actually happened. Okay. And that was just getting tired, not taking myself out of the game, and just too much wear and tear on the arm destroyed me. Never had surgery. Remember, it would have been Tommy John surgery. Back in those days, you'd have been out a couple. So I didn't say anything because I knew I'd probably miss a couple of years or a year. So I said nothing, but it ruined me for baseball. But by ruining me for baseball, got me into the football evaluation and propelled me to what I'm doing right now.
See, people don't know this, Mel. I hurt my shoulder back in August only so I could get better at football evaluation. I followed your path that you blazed for me. I still regret that shoulder injury. So you mentioned that Ernie Accorsi kind of guide you towards turning this passion into potentially a job. But when you're first getting started and thinking about turning your draft evaluation into content that people would one day consume, I mean, how big were you dreaming? I can't imagine you were thinking about 47 years later being the man synonymous with the NFL draft and being all over ESPN platforms for months at a time, talking about so many of the great players that have come through the league over the past 47 drafts. What was, in your mind at that time, a reasonable expectation for what draft coverage might become?
I really, in my own mind, felt like it could be huge. I really did. That's the only thing I got right. That and marrying Kim Kiper, as you know. But as far as getting things right, those were the two big things, right? And a lot of it had to do with just feeling that college football was huge. The NFL's huge. It brings everybody together for those couple days in April where you haven't had football since the Super Bowl. It's the only way then of improving your team was via the draft. There was no trades. There was no free agency. So and it was 17 rounds. It became 12 rounds. It wasn't just 7. It was 12 rounds. It was 17 rounds. So this was the only vehicle to improve your team from last year to this year is the draft. So I felt like, why wouldn't it be popular, right? Why wouldn't it be? So I put out the reports. And what really got me the confidence and the belief in myself and what I was doing was the letters I got, which are back there. I'll have to show them to you. I'll make copies and show them to you when we get to the draft or when you come down here to Kent Island at some point in time. But those letters from Bill Walsh, Don Shula, Gil Brandt, Lamar Hunt, Jack Faulkner, Ernie Accorsi. The list goes on and on and on. Those were because what I did when I sent them the report, like complimentary copies of the report, I would have a letter in there asking for any suggestions, any ways they thought I could improve the report, what they liked, what they didn't like with the report. It was a blue book. Remember the old blue book back in the day? And I would get those letters, and that led me to knowing those people. Jack Faulkner was one of my best friends in the business, along with Ernie. I had great conversations with Bill Walsh as well about football and learned a lot from him. So that was what I think, knowing that they approved from Ernie early on to everybody that I sent those books to in the league, never got a negative letter. I guess who's going to do that? But all of them were encouraging, I guess, from like legends in the business. Don Shula sends you a letter when you're 19, 18 years old, or Bill Walsh or Jack Faulkner. It means something. So I think the feedback from the league and those head coaches, general managers, even Lamar Hunt getting the book in Kansas City was pretty amazing. Having a Kansas City Chief owner wanting to buy the book. I got the check. I have the check from the Chiefs back framed. Okay. Okay. Wow. So it's things like that, Field, that just build you up as a kid who doesn't really know, has a belief, but doesn't know. But here's the league saying, hey, yeah, we're buying into this. And keep in mind, Field, they didn't know it's an 18, 19-year-old kid. I'm doing 25 radio shows a day in those days. I'm on shows all over the country. I think I'm a 40-year-old guy. I never lied.
Yeah.
They never asked me.
Right.
Nobody asked me, how old are you, Mel? I would have told them 18, 19. They thought I was 40. I'm doing Myron Cope show. I'm doing KMOX in St. Louis. I'm doing KPRC in Houston. I'm doing all these shows to get the book out there and would hang up the phone. The phone would light up like a Christmas tree, right? Order after order after order. So there you go. My father, who was without my father, supporting this and encouraging this, never would have happened. So I'd be in the basement in Baltimore, right? And I'd do radio shows. My father would be sitting right there. Finish the radio show with Myron Cope. And the phone would start ringing. We had 3 different lines coming into a landline, right? No cell phones, landlines. And I'd answer the phone. Now it'd be like 10 o'clock. It would settle down a little bit. So I'd go over and start typing in my book, typing in my reports on the players. Phone will ring. I said, could you get that? Nope, you got to get it. They want to talk to you. They don't want to talk to me. So I said, oh, shit. So I had to go over, but you know what that did? I got to know all my customers, and
Yeah.
they knew who I was, and they would be shocked. Mel, is this you? Why are you answering your phone? Why are you answering your phone? So I had about 5 minutes to explain why I was answering the phone, but then I have customers, and I just got an email from one of them. It was from 40 years ago. A good friend in the league. Now he's retired, but he still does some consulting. He bought the book in like 1979, 80, 81, and we became great friends. And he became a player personnel director in the league. So, he was playing semi-pro football then. He became a player personnel director, has a Super Bowl ring. Okay. So that's the kind of things I always tell kids. Calling, getting to know these people, getting relationships built really helped me back in the early years.
It's unbelievable, everything about this story. You mentioned Ernie Accorsi at some point offers you a job around 23, 24 years old. So what you're doing could have quickly become a thing of the past. Why do you not take the scouting job and instead decide to continue on with what you're doing?
I did accept it.
You accepted it.
The
And
book
then
was gone. The 1983 draft book. My favorite player of all time was John Elway.
That's
Travis
right.
Hunter's right there.
Yeah.
Travis Hunter. I just said Travis Hunter and John Elway, my two favorite players of all time. So we're going to go now and way back, right? John Elway's 83 book would have been my last one. Okay. I wouldn't have had an 84, 85, 86. I wouldn't have been at ESPN. I got the call from Ernie. I'm estimating around February of that year, prior to the 83 draft. He said, I want to bring you in. I want you to work for me with the Colts. I said, great. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, yeah. I said, the book, we have the book going. I said, just go through the year with your book. And then we'll announce you working with me in the Colts organization in July when camp opens. Great. I said, what do you want me to do on draft day? He said, go to that convention center. A lot of Colt fans will be down there with Bob Leffler, who was one of their PR guys, running the PR department. He'll be down there and you can talk to the fans and tell them about the players. Went through all that. Drafted John Elway. Ernie, they traded John Elway after they had drafted him and Ernie loved Elway. Traded without Ernie's knowledge. The team was talking. There was talk about the team leaving Baltimore, about him not being in his position after that. And Ernie said, hey, I'm probably going to be out of here because I can't deal with this. Okay. And he called me and said, Mel, I can't bring you in. I'm going to probably be leaving. The team may be moving. They just traded my quarterback without my knowledge. I find out from Vito Salino, a beat writer here in Baltimore. I said, what do you want me to do, Ern? He said, and remember, keep in mind, I already had the security people from New York and the NFL office came to my house at Ramblewood Road in Baltimore to interview me. So I'd already been approved by the league. I'm ready to go in. I'm a 23-year-old kid excited about working for Ernie. Of course, I get a little deflated, right? Now I got to go back. I thought the books were done. Now I'm working for him, getting all my things ready. Now Ernie says, no. So what do you want me to do? And he says, no harm, no foul. We didn't announce it. Just keep doing what you're doing. He said, you got a great thing going. You got a great business going. Keep it going. Just keep doing what you're doing. I did. Guess what? This is the summer of 83, right? So in 84, early 84, not just 6 months later, I get a call from what would happen was a good friend of mine, an agent, Greg Murata, was having lunch or dinner with Bill Fitz, who was producing the draft. Bud Wilkinson had just retired. The great Bud Wilkinson, right? Coach, great, tremendous coach, analyst. Remember Chris Schenkel, Bud Wilkinson, all those great games they called, like the Thanksgiving morning game, Nebraska, Oklahoma. But Bud was retiring. So Greg was talking to Bill about who's going to replace Bud. I got a friend of mine in Baltimore. He puts out books. I didn't tell him how old I was. Didn't tell him about the long hair like Fielding has now. But it's on nothing. So I get a call from Bill, come up and interview up to Bristol. One building in Bristol. I walk in, get an interview. They put me in the middle of the room in a chair, had 5 different people circling around me, asking me, pelting question after question after question for about an hour. Tell me about the offensive line with the 49ers. Tell me about the defense with this. Over and over about NFL, college football. Left there, didn't know anything. Bill called me 2 weeks later and said, hey, you got the job for the year. We're going to have you do the draft, Sports Center, any specials we have, anything we got going. That was my first year. Did the draft in 84 with Chris Berman and Bob Lee in Connecticut. We were upset there. It was a Boomer Esiason year. And the rest is history, Field. So without Ernie, I'd have been with the Colts for 4 or 5 months. He would have left. I wouldn't have been there because they'd have gotten rid of me when they moved to Indianapolis. Remember, they moved to Indianapolis, prior to the 84 draft. So I wouldn't have been, ESPN would have hired somebody else. So I would say without Ernie caring about a 23-year-old kid enough to, he knew his situation. He was probably going to be out of a GM job. Yet he's worrying about me. So again, without Ernie's care of a kid who we were friends, but just giving a daggone about me, I would have never been because ESPN would have hired somebody else. And who knows? I would have probably been, I don't know. I would have probably tried to go back at some point to do something. I love Calvert Hall, my high school. Probably go back there to try to do something in the athletic department.
So you get this call from ESPN and you end up there in 84. But I'm imagining at that time, this is not some, multi-year lucrative, the kind of deal that's going to set you up for life, right? Like this still has to be a little bit of a sort of like a courtship from ESPN. So what are the parameters when you first get started with the company? Is it, hey, we're going to bring you up for a few days, but we'll see you again in 11 and a half months, which is, again, now, well, much of what you and I do is concentrated from, let's call it January until the beginning of May. You could find Mel Kiper Jr. on SportsCenter on September 10th if he's breaking down the first game of this season for Colorado. What was it like back then?
Well, it was basically that. It was sports centers and doing things there. I mean, we did a couple. So George Grand and I did a couple NFL preview shows and college football preview shows and the like, if I remember correctly. And then all the draft coverage and then doing all that stuff. And it was with Chris and Bob, Boomer and Bob, and talk about two great people. Keep in mind, guys, I had never been on TV.
Yeah. What's that like?
I did radio. John Stedman, late great John Stedman brought me on when I was, I don't even know how old, younger than 22, 23, to do radio. And I did the TV for the first time with I remember saying to Boomer, I said, he said, just talk to me. Don't worry about the camera. Just talk to me like we're sitting here, wherever we are, a little round table, having a little discussion. Don't even worry about the cameras. If you remember, you couldn't even hear what I was saying. I was talking. I was like, Field, I think that's why I was talking. That was terrible. Okay. Why they brought me back, I don't know. The hair was like Paul Zimmer. You say, what are you, a leader of a rock band? The hair was a lot longer than yours is right now. They had no, it's like, okay, so I got the long hair like I'm a leader of a rock band. I'm whispering, okay, not talking with any enthusiasm or intensity. I was talking probably to put people to sleep. I was a cure for insomnia, basically, right? And I got called back to do 85 draft. Actually, got sent to California to work with Roy Firestone, who was great because Roy's all energy and really was in. So I was out there for 85. Came back in 86 to do stuff back in Bristol. I think in 87 might have been the first time we were actually in New York near the main set. So yeah, it took a while, but it was that maturation process as just learning how to do the job, on the job training, and getting a lot of help, as I say, from Bob Lee and Chris Berman about actually how to do it. Because without Chris, Chris, a boomer, right? I learned a lot from Chris, and then the next year got a little better. Next year, I'm saying a little better in terms of about the projection, okay, of what you were doing and just how to do it. By 87, 88, I started to feel a lot more comfortable. I actually did, obviously, in 1984.
Unbelievable. Again, I keep saying unbelievable because it really is. But you mentioned how you had to learn how to do the job. It's not just the TV part of it, Mel. Like, I think there are a lot of people that are fascinated by you. You're not scouting 10 players, right? You're not just like turning on one game a week and looking at the best of the best on the national broadcast or whatever the biggest event is on Saturday. You are scouting hundreds of players per year. What is the process that allows you to get access to what you need to actually scout these players? That is something I can imagine, by the way, has changed a lot in 47 years, right? We have just a little bit more in terms of resources compared to where you were when you first got started.
Yeah, when I see kids, I say, you have all those little sayings on your T-shirts, right? Pay your dues across there, please. But just to pay your dues. Don't think you can come out of college and get this, multi-year deal, 6 figures and all that. Pay your dues, because guess what? When you come out, and this is an era where, keep in mind, when I had to get basic fundamental stats, sacks from a defensive end, interceptions, yards per catch, receptions, completion percentage. You know what I had to do, Field? I had to call all those schools. I had to pick up a landline phone, call all those. You know how many schools I'm calling? 150 schools, right? Small schools, major schools, everybody. I spent roughly 25 to 30 hours a week just calling schools. And when you call schools, then you find out a lot of information you didn't call about. Then I had to ask them about younger players on the team. These are all the football contacts at the colleges. A lot of them became really good friends of mine. I still call them to this day, some of them to this day. But you couldn't just go to the internet and find stats. You had to call the schools. That's not scouting now. That's just basic stats, right? Then you had to go back with the big monster dish on the roof of Ramblewood Road, right? Back in the day. And that's how I was able to watch that in NFL games and do a lot of things and get access to a lot of things. Would call school, send me tapes, whatever you can, whoever could send me a tape of a player, get it the best you can. I had friends in the league by then. I could call them to help me out in that regard as well. So you had to really wouldn't say struggle to get it. You had to really work hard to get it. And I'm telling you, Phil, back in those days, I was staying up till, because the phone would ring all night. The only time I had any peace from the phone not ringing, okay, for orders, which obviously were important, we got a business going here, was around 10, 11 o'clock at night. So I'd be free from usually 10, 11 at night till 3 in the morning to do a lot of the work. I'd get up 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning because I had some radio to do and I had stuff to do. So I'm getting maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep. That's it on a regular basis, not just one day, but on a regular basis, 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. And that went from the time I started in 1979, 80, all the way through the ranks, because they got a little easier, obviously, with the internet and all that. But back in those days, you put in a lot of time. Put it that way. I was working 18 to 20-hour days on a regular basis.
Well, something that always amazes me is your passion for it has not withered at all. You are still as passionate about the draft now as you were when you first got started. I know that because I see it firsthand almost every single day from January to April. At some point, though, did you feel like the draft broke through? Because it's become, it truly is the Super Bowl of the offseason now. I'd argue it's a top 5 event on the NFL calendar, maybe even top 2, Mel, behind only the Super Bowl itself. Did you feel like at some point it had taken a leap from this event that fans looked forward to this event that people spent almost all year waiting for?
There were a lot of years going back to the New York days, Field, because when we would walk over to the draft, okay, whether it was at Radio City, whether it was at the Grand Ballroom, the Marriott Marquis, wherever it was back in those days, when you walked to the draft actually over and they'd drop you off, you'd see the fans, and they were representing just about every team in the league. And they were in line forever just to get in, and nobody was guaranteed a seat. So I saw that, and I knew from the reports, because the business was growing. Every year we were growing, and we were putting ads here, ads there. And obviously the ESPN situation really helped to get the name out there. All of a sudden, Mel Kiper puts an ad. They know you from being on ESPN and being the draft analyst there. But in terms of the knowing when it really hit big, and I'll tell you what too, Field, back in those days, the articles that were written were so negative about me, the draft. I mean, they were all, I'd get them and say, wow. And they'd send them. I said, I don't want to see them. I don't want to see the good. I don't want to see the bad, because the bad were brutal. I mean, you'd be looking for, I call them AOGs, another occupation guys. I'd have been another occupation guy. I can tell you that right now. If I'd have listened to those letters, like, what the heck am I? I don't know a football from a hockey puck. So I know nothing about this sport, considering what was written. And why am I there? Why are they televising the draft? Why are they wasting time with this? I mean, I had the letters. And one of my good friends that became a good friend of mine was Tony Kornheiser. Tony used to write a lot of those articles about me, and they were scathing. Okay. I mean, scathing. And I'd say, I got to know Tony, Andy Poland and I, who's one of my best friends out there. Andy was a legend, radio legend. She'll be in the Hall of Fame. Andy was doing radio with Tony, and through that, and I did radio with Andy back in the ESPN Zone on ESPN Radio in the late 90s. We started that 4-hour show every Saturday and Sunday down at the ESPN Zone. And Andy got me through to Tony. And now when I met Tony, we became good friends. I said, Tone, you used to write these incredibly bad, awful articles. He said, Mel, I didn't know you were doing a draft. I was told to write an critical article about the draft. And every year I did, I just flipped it around, made it different. And you were the target because you were the guy. It could have been, it wasn't anything personal. I said, okay, great. Okay. It seemed like it, but it wasn't. So I said, okay, we were great friends, but in those days, he was not the only one. You name the reporter, you name, the columnist, it was being read. So to see it change, you say, when did it changed for me, and it flipped for me when those articles weren't hostile anymore. When those articles weren't, wondering, why are you doing it? Questioning, why are you doing it? Who is this guy? When they knew and they understood the bandwagon. So everybody's jumped on the bandwagon. You better jump on. You're going to look like an idiot if you don't, because you're going to be ripping something that's becoming really popular. Everybody's really excited about. So to me, Field, that's when I think it flipped for me. When I didn't see any more hostile, negative articles coming in. They didn't tell me about them. I wasn't reading them anyway, but they didn't tell me that many were coming in. So the numbers dwindled down, and everybody bought in because people were watching. People were clamoring for this. People couldn't. And when I had people too, Field, they would tell me, this is customers of mine. I look more forward to the NFL draft than I do the start of the NFL regular season. And that wasn't echoed by one person. It was hundreds of people, thousands of people look more forward to these now 3 days than they do the regular season. So that resonated. That made sense. And then when I finally found out we're at the draft one year, I don't remember what year it was, Field. And I used to come down for day 2, casual, right? not buttoned up, right? Come down just to relax and hang out with the writers and whoever's there and the NFL people and just write down the picks. And Freddie Godelli's sitting there, who was a producer of the draft, legendary Hall of Famer Freddie Godelli. I said, Freddie, what are you doing here on day 2? You should be home. He said, Mel, I'm scoping this out because next year we're televising every pick. You're going to be here for every pick of the draft. I said, whoa. We went from leaving the 84 draft in the second round for a tractor pull or a speedboat race, which we did. We left the NFL draft in 1984, signed off, and go to a tractor pull or a speedboat race. And now, whatever year it was, we're televising every pick of the NFL draft. That's how far it came, Field.
It's come a far way. And by the way, this will mark 15 years of the NFL now doing a 3-day event.
What? Is it really 15 years?
15 years, because I know that only because, no, it's 16 years, Mel. I apologize. Wait, is that right? No, 15, excuse me, because I was in Kansas City in 2010 when we had the 6th pick in the draft, and it was the first time that we broadcast, or the NFL broadcast, the event on 3 days, or in this case, 2 nights and 1 full day on Saturday. We took Eric Berry, a safety out of Tennessee, had a very good career as well. So you mentioned sort of having this almost like Teflon nature to you because of some of the criticism that you got from reporters. But no, the reality is you have long had the biggest platform that NFL executives and scouts and coaches have seen as well. And they're famously, Bill Tobin says, who the hell is Mel Kiper? Which, you guys, as I understand it, have talked many times since, until he passed. But what was it like, or what has it been like over your career when you hear from these GMs who are pulling the trigger on the picks, who are saying, like, what's the deal, man? Why are you giving me flack for my draft picks when you're on the outside and I'm on the inside?
Well, some of the ones that were the best friends of mine said, Mel, say whatever you have to say. Don't worry about our friendship. Say whatever you have to say. We can take it. If it's critical, fine. If it's positive, fine. Don't ever couch it because of, or change it, or tone it down because I'm a friend of yours. So I was never felt any pressure or any feeling that I had to shill for anybody, had to be toning it down or tempering my negativity or positivity. I didn't want to go. So I never felt, it never got into my head, because if it does, you're finished. You can't do your job. If you're sitting there wondering what you say, what you should say, who am I going to affect? Who am I going to offend? It's not going to work, Field. So to me, I was free and easy during those years, really up every year, all those years there, because of the friends I had in the league not telling me point blank, do not worry about anything you say. It will not affect our friendship at all. Now, some of the ones I didn't know took exception. Like I didn't know Bill. I respected Bill, didn't know Bill. And what he said, guess what? And I've said this since, I would have said the same thing. I wouldn't have said it maybe like that, because what happened, well, I'll tell you what happened. If you're making a pick and it's Christmas morning, it's like somebody saying, I don't like my present. I don't like what Santa brought me. Okay. Who's going to say that? Right. So you don't want your fans to hear negativity about a pick you just made. You don't want that. You want the fan base to be excited, start buying season tickets. They don't want somebody to be knocking the play. So I understand where Bill was coming from. I also know that was more of an amplification of what was going on, and it brought all the focus to me because of that, right? Being called out. You get called out, fans, everybody in the country has to really defends kind of the underdog a little bit. So when you're getting attacked or whatever, or talked about negatively, they come to your defense a little bit, and they understand, hey, I was basically a fan doing a job, or a fan. I always say fans have opinions. They have great opinions. I respect fans' opinions, right? So I have that respect of the fans. And then the next year, when it was either the next year or 2 years later, the best call I ever made in the NFL draft field. People say, what was your best call, worst call? My best call was when the Rams drafted Lawrence Phillips and Eddie Kennison. You probably remember this draft. Yeah. I said before the picks were made, I would have drafted Eddie George and Marvin Harrison. Okay? Best prediction ever, best valuation analysis ever by me in all these years. They're interviewing Rich Brooks after those picks were made. Mel Kiper said that doesn't agree with your picks. He said you should have drafted, Eddie George and Marvin Harrison. You drafted Lawrence Phillips and Eddie Kennison. How do you respond to Mel? Rich Brooks said, Mel's right to his opinion. We feel we got 2 really good football players. We're happy. Blah blah. Went into about his players and just let it go. Nobody to this day, Field, ever talks about that opinion that I had or analysis I had. Nobody even remembers it because it wasn't amplified. Yeah, there was no focal point of that draft being a comment made by this coach or this GM about Kiper. It was nothing. He just let it go. And that was something that I always tell people. That's why everybody remembers 1994 is because of the comments that were made. And I had to respond to them. And I remember Fred Field, you'll love this. I'm sitting there with Joe Theismann. We're at the main set, and Boomer and Joe and I are talking. And over here, I see the our great friend Chris Mortensen, right? He's going to be interviewing Bill Tobin. Now, that's on the side, the little monitor. I'm looking at Joe this way, and Joe and I are going over our notes and going over our highlight packages. You take him, trying to figure out the next 4 or 5 picks. When I get in my ear, from Freddie, Mel, we're coming back after the break, and you're going to be looking at camera 3 or whatever and make a comment about. I said, Freddie, what am I making a comment about? He said, Bill Tobin's ripping you about what you said about the Colts. I said, oh, I didn't hear this. Yeah. I didn't hear any of it. I said, what do you mean? He said, you look in camera 3 and you respond. And that's when you heard whatever I said, it was based on just responding to a criticism. I didn't know exactly what he said. And I found out later, and Mort would always say, well, you saw me, I kept moving back. I spoke out better back, I kept moving back and back. And but I had no idea because I'm talking to Joe, but I had to respond to that, kind of blindly respond, right? Because I didn't really know what I was responding to, but I knew what Freddie said. Hey, and that year after that draft, it was funny, we're leaving. And Freddie was one of my best friends in the industry, one of the best producers ever. That's why he's a Hall of Famer. Freddie, by the way, Godelli, he was like a GM. He would want reports on everybody. We talked all the time. That got me ready because he was calling. So Freddie gave me the helmet phone from that year. I got the ESPN helmet phone from 1994 back in my office on a shelf. And Freddie said, just take this, take it. And that 94, who would have known that 94 draft? And Trent Dilfer, ironically, who was part of that, because it was Trent Dilfer, Trev Alberts. Trent ended up coming to Baltimore and winning a Super Bowl for my Ravens, right? And Trev worked with me at ESPN. He didn't have a problem with what I said. We were fine. And it just went that way. And it came full circle when Trent Dilfer came back here to win a Super Bowl as the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens.
I've always found, Mel, that the most successful people can accept honesty. They can accept opinions. And by the way, when you make mistakes on evaluations, and every single one of us does, you own up to them and you learn from them. And just like a GM should when they miss a pick, because even the very best, the top of the food chain GMs do have their occasional misses. Mock drafts have become such a huge part of what we do, Mel. And there's people everywhere. I'd be curious, and I know, and this is something that I think is a credit to you, you don't labor over what everybody else is saying or writing and everybody else's mock drafts. You try to keep your blinders on because you want to use your opinions and what you're hearing from your contacts within the NFL to educate yourself and give your audience your perspective, not somebody else's perspective. But what would you say is your feeling when you see, thousands of mock drafts that probably are out there, Mel, in large part because you inspired generations of people to cover the draft like you have?
Rewarding. I mean, it's just nice to see. It's great to see that all these fans all over the country have an opinion, which I respect. Yep. And they put work and time into it. They read it, they see it. They're watching everything these days. You can watch all these college games every Saturday. You can get information about anything you need to get information on field. And they have to see it every time you go on the computer. It pops up another mock draft. Another mock draft, and they're updated. It's like every day. So it's great. And I started with a mock draft back in my book. I had 2 mock drafts. I had a mock draft on what I thought would happen, how I would predict it to happen. And I had a mock draft on what I would do if I were the GM of each team. Then I expanded that to a 3-round mock. I did a 6-round mock when nobody was doing 6-round mocks.
You're crazy.
So I think I started this mock industry. It's gotten, people say, out of control. I love it just because it's fans that care, Field. We're here talking because fans care so much about what we do and what ESPN, and think about ESPN. They took what the NFL didn't want to be televised and made it a television event. Pete Rozelle didn't want this to be televised. He thought it would embarrass the league, announcing picks. It's going to be, we can't, it's a non-event. You're just going to be announcing who was picked. There's time in between picks. What are you going to do? They made this an event. And I go back to Freddie Godelli, John Wildhack, the AD at Syracuse, producing the draft. John was great. He's the reason I got my haircut. He loves Kim because Kim got my haircut. John was like, get that haircut, please. And Kim cut it. And then you have Jay Rothman. Yeah, Brian Ryder rides in the job they do. I mean, and Rob Adamski on day 3. It's the preparation that everybody behind the scenes does and the highlight packages and everything they do. They're as prepared as an NFL front office. You know that, Field. You work with everybody. Yeah. And I see when I hear what Brian Ryder, and like I said, going back with Jay and with John and with Freddie and and Bill Fitz back in the day, these guys are amazing. And, to me, that makes what we do so much easier and so much more enjoyable. And also every draft is different. Field, you say, why are you in theory? Every draft is different. It's like snowflakes. They're all different, right? It's NFL draft is all about, and they always say about memory. I'm always ready, looking forward to next year. Once this is over, you're looking to the next prospect. So that, I think, fuels the enthusiasm, is knowing that every year is going to be a lot different than the previous one.
It truly is. It's the best. It sells hope, by the way, too. There are teams, if you're at the very bottom, the Titans or the Giants or the Browns or the Patriots or the Jaguars, you've got a little bit of hope because you have a top 5 pick this year. I feel like it's a responsibility for anybody that ever interviews you, Mel, to get the facts straight on what some people believe is your most notable perhaps daily occurrence. Talk to us about your diet and your appetite for pumpkin pie. Is it true that you still consume a piece a day? Clearly,
I have the worst habits ever.
No,
I think.
No, you don't.
I do. Ask Kim. She tells me, she screams at me all the time. That's the only time she screams at me is about what I'm eating. So the pumpkin pie thing, I don't know how that started, but I don't eat the crust. I only eat the filling.
Yep.
It's fat-free whipped cream, which I can show you. It's in a few cans. DiPietro, Rothenberg and DiPietro in New York. One of my favorite, I do the radio every week with them, usually during the year. Whenever they send me fat-free whipped cream, that's just a thank you for coming on. It's because they know I love that. And I started years. I just liked it.
Yeah.
But put it this way, it's no good without the whipped cream. You can't just have pumpkin pie without the fat-free ready whipped cream. You can't. It doesn't work. The ready whipped fat-free whipped cream with that light blue Chargers look like that baby blue bottle, or the red one, which is the regular ready whip. If you want to go ready whip, whipped cream. Either one, the red one or the blue, light baby blue one, they work. They got to be part and parcel to the pumpkin pie. And then the glass of fat-free skim milk. That's what you need to make it all come together. And that's what I do pretty much all year, except when Safeway up the street doesn't have pumpkin pie. Then Kim tries to make it. I don't like it. Don't tell her. She's back. Don't tell me about it. She knows that I'm not a big fan of homemade pumpkin pies. I only like the store-bought. I am a big fan of homemade apple pie, but not homemade pumpkin pie. So there you go. It's got to be store-bought pumpkin pie. And there's a couple months they're like, now can't get them. Can't get it.
Really?
Or in summer, can't get it. I don't know why. They don't make pumpkin pie in the summer. I don't know why. Come August, come September, it gets a little chill in the air. They'll start making it again. But I do have a little break in the action there from that aspect of it, Field. So yeah, that's the whole pumpkin pie deal, and it's going to continue on forever because it's not changing. That's something I always do. There's a lot of other things along the way that I do that are crazy, but that's probably the main thing.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that includes continuing to do your draft coverage.
I think a lot of people think it's been broken for a long time. It's never going to get fixed. That's what they're thinking. It's never getting fixed.
No way. Well, let me ask you this as we wrap up here, Mel, because I want to be respectful of your time. I know you.
I thought we could go another hour, Field. Come on.
We can go 5 hours. I'm
looking at the clock here. I got time, pal. Believe me, this is a great respite.
We've been going for 9 months on this draft class weekly, and in most recent months, it feels like every hour, but it's more like, a few times a day talking about players. But if you think about sort of your journey and the NFL draft, which is you two are going to be inextricably linked for the entirety of your career. When you reflect upon it, what would be sort of the lessons that you think you've learned that somebody who doesn't necessarily follow the NFL draft, but just wants to find something they're passionate about in life and make it perhaps their occupation could learn from what you have learned?
I think it's like you just said it. Find something you're passionate about, and no matter what it is. And I didn't know. I mean, we were losing money the first 4 years of putting out the reports. My father was able to provide the funding for it instead of him the belief in it. So I didn't know if it was going to work. I wasn't doing this because I was going to be making. I didn't know what it was going. I didn't know if it would lead to me making $1. So like I said, we were losing. We finally made that up, and luckily it became a success before my father passed away in 1988. He saw the business grow. Thank God that he was able to see it. Saw me at ESPN, so all the things were going on. So I think when you look back, you say, find something you're passionate about. Don't think you're going to get hand gift wrap something. Like I said, pay your dues across that shirt because it takes time. Like I said, I was clueless, and I got to thank ESPN for hiring a clueless kid. And they'll tell you that wouldn't happen now. There's no way. Back in those days, they gave me that opportunity, and they had to put up with a lot of amateur hour from me because it was somebody who had no experience. So you go on there, and through Chris and Bob, who were the true professionals, showing me the way, really help field, but it was about passion for what you do because at the time I didn't care. I didn't know if it was going to be a business. I'm starting out I had no clue if fans around the country were going to, as Ernie said, crave that information. But I do think a lesson to everybody is in the era, and I'll just say this to everybody, in the era of cell phones and the era of don't talk to people, but text them, throw that out. Throw that out. It doesn't work. When you want to talk to somebody, call them on the phone and talk to them because those years of making all those hours upon hours of calls to get stats created relationships. And when I was on the phone to get a stat on a player, that led to a conversation about the team. Say Clemson. Tim Beret at Clemson. When I'm talking to Tim at Clemson, he'd tell me all kinds of things about Clemson Tiger players. Okay. And or players are just freshmen. You learned about, or an injury to this, or something to affect. Hey, Mel, he didn't play well in that game, but he was a little banged up. And all the things you need to know from a scouting standpoint, you would find out. And a conversation field that I thought would be 5 minutes turned out to be 50 minutes or 2 hours sometimes. And this is what I say. And then those relationships that I had with those individuals, those great football people at those schools, football contacts, media relations, sports information directors, I guess was the term we use, right? Sports information directors, football contacts, talking to those individuals for that amount of time, and they knew every week, every year, it was going to be the same thing, develop that relationship that allowed me to get information I would never have gotten. So I think that's part and parcel to what I was able to do is pick up the phone, talk to people. And now it's so texting, emailing, all this nonsense, which is great. It makes life easier, but it takes away the contact you need of getting to know somebody via a conversation. So I would say to kids right now, cell phones, fine. Okay. Yeah, I take mine to the draft. You won't see it near me anymore. Tim's the cell phone. You want me to get Tim's. You don't get me on my. It's funny, Field. They'll call me, leave messages on his cell phone. It's sitting in that drawer for outside of 1 week. And when I go to the different stores, I take it with me just in case something happens. I don't even turn it on. So any messages that come in after the draft, I don't even get them because I don't even check that phone. It's brought to the draft for 5 days. That's it. That's my cell phone. It works hard each year. It works for 5 days and it sits in there and I pick it. I take it and Kim will yell, make sure you take the phone with you whenever I go. So I take the phone, I throw it in the car and never turn it on. If I needed it, I'd use it. Most of the time you don't need it. So, because I'm not going that long anyway. So that's the story of the cell phone for me. Very rarely used.
It's one of my favorite things about you, Mel. I am probably guilty of being a part of the generation that spends too much time texting. And at the risk of getting emotional on a show here, I have so loved your phone calls throughout the months and the years. It just means, nobody is like Mel Kiper Jr. I will say that much. So thank you for all.
I can say this to do what you do. And I got to say this, and believe me, to do fantasy football all year, cover the NFL all year, cover the NFL draft from the time you got to start in September to now, and then still be here going through. And the hair, it's not missing a beat here. And it hasn't been trimmed yet because you promised me you weren't going to get a cut.
No way. Not anytime soon.
You gotta let it. I want you to let it go as long as you possibly can.
That's the plan.
All right, that's the plan because I want to see that. I want to see the '84 Kuiper hair again. You ever see that
'84
'84 Kuiper hair?
Yeah, I love it. It's my inspiration right now.
You got a ways to go, Field. You got a ways to go, pal.
I do got a ways to go.
And then you get that leader of a rock band look. That's what I want to see.
Hey, man,
that's what I want to say.
It's a tough economy right now, so I'll save $1 however I can. If that includes not going to the barber,
no haircuts, no more haircuts. No haircuts. It doesn't matter to me. Mine grows at a very, I'd say with that much every 6 months it might grow. Where it used to grow that much, now it's slowed down to a screeching halt. Where yours is at 25 going strong, Phil.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for right there, Mel. Well, Mel, when I say this, I mean it sincerely. You are the absolute best. Mel Kiper Jr., you are an industry. Everybody who is watching or listening to this, if you love the NFL draft, you need to say thank you to Mel Kiper Jr. I do daily. It's such an honor truly to work with you, Mel, and I can't thank you enough for joining us here today for just a teeny, tiny, just a mini break from our Shedeur Sanders and mock draft talk. We have plenty of that over the remaining time before the NFL draft. But Mel, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Field. You're the best, pal. Appreciate it, bud.
I've probably said this before about some of our prior interviews here on the Field Talk podcast, but I really mean it with Mel. I could have gone on for hours. Now, Mel is a talker, and that's one of the many things that I love and admire about him. But that's because he's passionate. He's passionate about what he does, and he's passionate about the people that he cares about the most. His story about how he has made the NFL draft such a must-cover event is incredible to me. Talk about one of the great big bets on not just yourself, but also something that you believe has real potential. Mel Kiper Jr. is all of that and so much more. I hope this shined through when you were watching it, but I'll reiterate it if it didn't, at least to you. On top of being the face of the NFL draft, Mel Kiper Jr. is as good and quality and humble of a human as you will ever meet. It's an honor to call him a friend. For those that watch today's Field Talk podcast on YouTube, do us a favor. Click that subscribe button. Also, if you're listening on a podcast, hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. And one last reminder that the Field Talk podcast is presented by Roback. Big thanks to our friends over at Roback. RHOBACK.com is the website. And enter my name, Field, F-I-E-L-D, for 20% off your first order. There is all kinds of incredible gear with the best fit and the best feel. Until next time, we'll talk to you all soon.